They stepped off those prison trucks expecting to die. Instead, they discovered something that would shatter everything they believed about honor, loyalty, and the meaning of war itself. August 15, 1945. Camp Lordsburg, New Mexico. 300 Japanese women, former military personnel captured across the Pacific, stood trembling in the desert heat. They had been taught since birth that capture meant dishonor worse than death. They expected American soldiers to laugh at their shame, to abuse them, to treat them like the animals their propaganda said Americans believed they were. What happened next defied everything both sides thought they knew about war. When their own Japanese commanders raised their fists to enforce obedience and punish them for the disgrace of survival, American guards stepped between them. For the first time in their lives, the enemy became their protectors. And the women wept, not from pain, but from a confusion so profound it would change them forever. If you think you understand World War II, you're about to discover the most shocking truth about human nature in wartime. Hit subscribe because this story has been buried for 80 years, and what these women experienced will destroy everything you thought you knew about enemies, honor, and the real meaning of courage. Ko Tanaka was 24 years old when she stepped off that transport truck, her cotton uniform torn from weeks of travel, her face sunburned and streaked with sweat. She had worked as a translator in Manila, watching American prisoners being beaten and starved. She knew what happened to captured women. The propaganda had been clear. Americans were demons who showed no mercy. But the first American she encountered was a young officer with kind eyes who spoke slowly, using simple words. You will be safe here. You will be fed and given shelter. You will be treated according to international law. Safe. The word felt foreign. Ko had been told Americans were monsters who tortured prisoners for sport. Yet here was this man speaking gently, promising protection. Then came the voice that made her blood freeze. Lieutenant Yamamoto, one of 6 Japanese officers also imprisoned at the camp. His words cut through the desert air like a blade. You will maintain discipline. You will obey. You will not embarrass our nation further. Ko's head dropped immediately. Even in captivity, even after the emperor himself had surrendered, the hierarchy remained. The shame remained. The fear remained. But what happened next would haunt her for the rest of her life. The dining hall at Camp Lordsburg was unlike anything these women had seen in months. Long tables covered with trays of real food. Rice, yes, but also vegetables, meat, bread, and fruit. Apples sat in bowls, shining red. Pitchers of water and milk stood at each table. For months, they had eaten rice mixed with weeds, thin soup, sometimes fish if they were lucky. Many had lost dangerous amounts of weight, their uniforms hanging loose on skeletal frames. Now they saw more food than they had eaten in weeks. An American cook, a large man with a friendly face, gestured for them to take plates. Help yourselves. Eat as much as you want. The women looked at each other, uncertain. Was this a test? Were they supposed to refuse to show discipline? When Ko received her tray, heavy with food, she nearly dropped it. The weight alone shocked her. She took a small bite of the meat, warm, seasoned, tender. Her eyes watered. Around her, other women reacted the same way. Some cried quietly into their food. Then came the footsteps, heavy boots on wood floors. Lieutenant Yamamoto entered the dining hall with the other Japanese officers. The women immediately stiffened, forks paused midair, heads bowed lower. His voice was harsh, filled with disgust. You eat their food and forget your honor. You accept comfort from the enemy? Have you no shame? The room fell completely silent. Several women set down their forks. Their appetites vanished. Guilt crashed over them like a wave. Ko felt tears slide down her cheeks, not from joy at the food, but from shame. She couldn't swallow. The enemy had fed her better than her own people had in months, and now she was being told this kindness was betrayal. Yuki Sato had suffered from an infected wound for weeks. No one in her unit had medicine to give her. Medical supplies had run out months before the surrender. The infection was spreading, and she knew she was dying. On her second day at Camp Lordsburg, an American nurse with red hair and freckles examined the wound. Through a translator, she said something no one had ever said to Yuki before. Is that okay? Can I look at this? Is that okay? No one had ever asked Yuki if something was okay. In the Japanese military system, you obeyed. You endured. You never got asked. The nurse was gentle. She cleaned the wound carefully, applied antiseptic, and gave Yuki real medicine, penicillin that could save her life. When she noticed old bruises on Yuki's arms from when commanders had grabbed her roughly for mistakes, the nurse's smile faded. Did someone hurt you? She asked through the translator. Yuki said nothing. How could she explain? In her world, that was just discipline. That was normal. But the nurse wrote something on her chart, and made sure Yuki got extra medical attention. Within a week, the infection that would have killed her was completely healed. The enemy had saved her life while her own people had let her suffer. That first night, the women lay in real beds with mattresses, pillows, and clean blankets. After sleeping on hard ground, on crowded ships, on anything they could find, the comfort felt like a dream. But through the thin walls, they heard the Japanese commanders arguing among themselves, discussing the disgrace of surrender, the weakness of accepting American charity. Lieutenant Yamamoto's voice rose above the others. Tomorrow we will make sure they understand. They may be prisoners, but they are still Japanese. They will maintain honor, or they will be reminded of their duty. The threat hung in the air. The women knew what reminded meant. It meant punishment. It meant being pulled aside and beaten. Even in captivity, the commanders still had power over them through culture, through shame, through everything they had been taught since birth. Ko stared at the ceiling, watching shadows move across the wooden beams. Her stomach was full for the first time in months. She was clean. They had been allowed to shower with real soap and warm water. She was lying on a soft bed, and yet, she had never felt more conflicted. "Are you awake?" whispered the woman in the next bed. "Yes," Ko whispered back. "Do you think we are betraying our country by being here?" Ko didn't answer right away. How could she? Everything she believed was being challenged. The Americans were supposed to be monsters, but they had been kind. The commanders were supposed to protect them, but they made them feel ashamed for surviving. "I don't know," Ko finally said. "I don't know anything anymore." The confrontation everyone had been dreading came on a cool September morning. The women were lined up for breakfast when Lieutenant Yamamoto and two other commanders approached. Yamamoto carried a stick, a traditional symbol of authority and discipline in the Japanese military. His voice rang out across the yard. "You have all forgotten your duty. You have become soft, accepting the enemy's charity, smiling at their soldiers, forgetting the honor of Japan. Today, you will be reminded of who you are." He pointed the stick at three women. Sakura, a 19-year-old who had been humming an American song she'd heard on the radio, Yuki, and Ko. "You three especially have been seen fraternizing with Americans, laughing with them, acting as if you were friends with the enemy. This will be corrected." The women's blood ran cold. They knew what corrected meant. Public punishment, humiliation, physical discipline. Sergeant Miller, the American guard who had been watching from across the yard, saw what was happening. He started walking quickly toward the scene. Yamamoto raised his stick, stepping toward Sakura. "You will kneel and apologize for your dishonor." Sakura's legs trembled, but something in her had changed since arriving at the camp. She had been protected once. Maybe she didn't have to accept punishment for the crime of being treated like a human being. "I said kneel," Yamamoto shouted. "No," Sakura whispered, then louder. "No." The word hung in the air like thunder. The other women gasped. No one said no to a commander. Yamamoto's face turned purple with rage. He raised the stick high, preparing to strike. But before it could fall, Sergeant Miller was there, along with four other American guards. Miller grabbed the stick mid-swing, yanking it from Yamamoto's hands. "I told you once before," Miller said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You don't touch these women. Not now. Not ever again. They are Japanese. They are under my authority." Yamamoto screamed. Captain Richards approached, having been alerted to the commotion. He addressed Yamamoto directly. "You have no authority in this camp. You are a prisoner same as them. And these women are under the protection of the United States military. If you attempt to harm them again, you will be placed in isolation. Do you understand?" Yamamoto looked around. He was surrounded by American guards. The women were watching, and for the first time he saw something new in their eyes. Not fear, not submission, but defiance. He had lost. "This is a disgrace," he hissed. "You are all traitors to Japan." Ko stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. "We are survivors. That is not the same as traitors." The words stunned everyone. A Japanese woman contradicting a male officer in public violated every cultural norm she had been raised with. But she had said it anyway. Captain Richards addressed the women through Ko's translation. "You don't have to be afraid of them anymore. You are under our protection. Anyone who tries to harm you will answer to us. You have my word." When the women heard this promise, one by one, they began to cry. Not from fear or shame, but from relief. From gratitude. From the overwhelming realization that they were truly safe. Sakura fell to her knees, sobbing. Yuki covered her face with her hands. Even the older women, who had trained themselves never to show emotion, wept openly. The Americans had done what their own commanders never had. They had protected them. And in that moment, everything the women had been taught about honor, about loyalty, about who was good and who was evil, shattered completely. The enemy had become their protectors. Their own people had revealed themselves as the true source of their fear. In the weeks that followed, the women began to change. They walked differently. They held their heads higher. When they passed the Japanese commanders, now isolated in a separate section, they didn't bow as deeply as before. They started asking questions. Ko asked Sergeant Miller about America, about what life was like there. Did women work? Could they choose their own husbands? Did they go to school? Miller answered honestly, and his answers opened new worlds. Women in America could vote. They could own property. They could divorce husbands who mistreated them. They could become doctors, lawyers, even pilots. This information spread through the barracks like wildfire. The women discussed it endlessly. Imagine, Yuki said one evening, choosing who you marry, not having it arranged by your parents. Imagine, another added, learning any profession you want, not just the ones considered appropriate for women. Imagine, Ko said quietly, not being hit for making a mistake or asking a question. They were beginning to imagine different possibilities. Not that they wanted to become American, they were still Japanese in their hearts, but that may be the way they had been. Taught things must be was not the only way things could be. In December 1945, the first group of women was scheduled to return to Japan. Ships would take them from California back across the Pacific to a country that might reject them, to families that might be ashamed of them. Sergeant Miller came to say goodbye to Ko in the infirmary. He handed her a small English dictionary. So you can keep learning. Maybe it will help you in the future. Ko took the book, holding it like treasure. Thank you, Sergeant Miller, for everything. Not just the book, for protecting us, for showing us that enemies can be kind. Miller smiled sadly. I hope things go well for you back home. I hope you find peace. I don't know what we'll find, Ko admitted. But we're different now. We've seen things that can't be unseen. We've learned things that can't be unlearned. Sometimes that's the best thing that can come from war, Miller said. Learning that the enemy is human too. Remembering that kindness matters more than national boundaries. Decades later, an elderly Ko sat in her home in Tokyo, surrounded by her grandchildren. They asked her, as they often did, to tell stories about the war. There was a time when I was a prisoner in America, she began, and the children leaned in, eyes wide. I thought it would be the worst time of my life. I had been taught that Americans were cruel, that capture meant dishonor and suffering. But I learned something surprising. She told them about Sergeant Miller stepping between her and the commander, about the American nurses who treated her injuries, about the food, the safety, the protection, about the moment she realized that everything she had been taught was wrong. It changed how I see the world, she said. I learned that no group of people is entirely good or entirely evil. That kindness can come from unexpected places. That true honor isn't about following orders blindly. It's about treating others with dignity and standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Her grandchildren listened, absorbing these words. This wasn't the usual war story. This was something more complicated, more human, more true. Did you ever see Sergeant Miller again? One grandchild asked. Ko shook her head. No, but I never forgot him. And I tried to live my life the way he showed me. With kindness, with protection for those who need it, with courage to stand against cruelty, even when it comes from people who are supposed to be on your side. She picked up the old English dictionary from her shelf, worn from decades of use. He gave me this, and through it, he gave me a new way of seeing the world. That was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. The story of those 300 Japanese women at Camp Lordsburg reveals a truth that challenges everything we think we know about war, loyalty, and human nature. It shows that sometimes the enemy shows more humanity than your own people. That protection can come from unexpected sources. That true honor isn't about blind obedience. It's about treating people with dignity. For those women, the tears they shed when American soldiers stepped between them and their own commanders weren't just tears of relief. They were tears of revelation. In that moment, they learned that the world wasn't divided into pure good and pure evil, but into those who choose compassion and those who choose cruelty. And that choice has nothing to do with which uniform you wear or which flag you salute. This is the story they don't teach in history books. The story of how kindness survived in the machinery of war. The story of how enemies became protectors and protectors revealed themselves as oppressors. If this story moved you as much as it should have, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. There are more untold stories from World War II at World War IIpedia that reveal the complex truth about human nature in wartime. Truths that will change how you see history, war, and the meaning of real courage. The question isn't whether this happened. The documents prove it did. The question is, What does it teach us about the choices we make when faced with the opportunity to show kindness or cruelty to those who have no power to defend themselves?